shows how fear and suspicion in Salem quickly turned into deadly accusations. It reveals how innocent people become victims of a community consumed by suspicion, how quickly justice can fail when panic and accusations replace evidence, and how fear and belief in witchcraft allowed the innocent to be judged and condemned.
In 1692, a small village in Colonel, Massachusetts became the stage for one of the most infamous episodes in American history. The Salem witch trials remain one of the many tragic and unsettling events in history. Although Salem Village no longer exists as it once did, the fear and injustice that unfolded there in 1692 continue to shape how we understand panic, religion, and justice today. What began as unexplained illness quickly morphed into this evil and sick reception of fear.
Neighbors accused neighbors, families turned against each other, courts accepted dreams and visions as evidence. By the time the hysteria ended, more than 200 people had been accused of witchcraft, and 20 innocent people were executed, most of them being women.
The Salem witch trials are often remembered as a strange moment in early American history, but they represent something much deeper. The trials show how fear and pressure can lead to injustice, how society reacts to a crisis, and how tragedy can eventually lead to reform. The Salem witch trials demonstrate how reaction to fear created suffering, but also how the aftermath helped shape changes in American ideas about justice and legal fairness.
The trials didn't just suddenly happen. Historians explain that many tensions were already at play in colonial New England. In A Storm of Witchcraft, Emerson W. Baker explains that political instability, religious anxiety, economic struggles, and fear of war all contributed to the crisis. Massachusetts had recently attacked and believed the devil was actively working against them. Mary Beth Norton in The Devil's Snare argues that fear caused by war and violence increased anxiety in Salem. Refugees from frontier conflicts brought stories of destruction and danger, which made people more likely to believe accusations of witchcraft. In a society that strongly believed in the supernatural, fear easily turned into suspicion.
At the same time, divisions within the community made conflicts worse. In Salem possessed, Paul Boyer and Stephen explained that Salem village was divided by economical and social disagreements. Some families supported traditional farming lives, while others were connected to trade and economic growth in nearby Salem town. These tensions created resentment that later appeared in witchcraft accusations.
Together, fear, division, and religious belief created the conditions for crisis. The trials began when young girls Betty Paris and Abigail Williams claimed to be afflicted by witches, accusing Tituba, an enslaved woman in the Paris household, and under pressure confessed and accused others. She had described witches, spirits, and secret meetings with the devil. Instead of questioning the accusations, the court accepted spectral evidence, meaning visions or dreams, as proof. Primary sources from the Salem Witch Trials documentary archive and court's records show how accusations quickly spread once fear took control.
Francis Hill, in A Delusion of Satan, explains that mass hysteria allowed people to accept weak evidence and accuse others without proof. Fear became stronger than reason. Once accusations began, it became difficult to stop them. Carol F. Carlson's The Devil in the Shape of a Woman explains that women who did not fit traditional Puritan expectations, such as widows or women who owned property, were more likely to be accused. Fear of women's independence and social tension influenced who became targets.
Individual stories reveal the human cost of these horrible reactions. Rebecca Nurse, a respected elderly woman, was accused when Ann Putman Jr. claimed to have seen an old woman in her grandmother's chair, and later named Nurse. Soon after, Abigail Williams and Ann Putman Sr. also reported being tormented by the nurse's spirit. A small committee visited Rebecca, age 71, who had been ill in bed, to tell her that she had been accused of witchcraft. Despite the strong support from the community, she was soon hung on July 19th, 1692. The story of Sarah Wilde shows how personal disputes and community conflicts spiraled into deadly accusations. Despite her denials and her husband's and son's constant claims that the accusations were driven by old grudges and revenge, they relied heavily on spectral evidence. After a brief trial, 65-year-old Sarah Wilds was found guilty of witchcraft and sentenced to her death on July 19, 1692. These cases demonstrate how during the trials, people were often treated as guilty before they even can prove their innocence.
Children were not spared from accusations during the trials either. The youngest person accused and imprisoned was Dorothy Dorcas Good, the daughter of Sarah Good, a 39-year-old woman who was also accused of witchcraft, and later executed during the first group hanging of the trials. Dorcas was only about 4 or 5 years old when she was accused. Despite her young age, she was taken to jail and treated like the other prisoners. She was held for nearly 8 months, shackled and confined in a dark, dungeon-like cell.
Reports from the time suggest that the harsh conditions caused her severe physical and emotional trauma. While Dorcas was in prison, tragedy also struck her family. Her infant sister, Mercy Good, died while in prison with her mother. This shows how deeply the fear and panic of Salem trials affected even the youngest and most innocent members of the Salem community.
Sources also revealed disagreement at the time. Cotton Mather's The Wonders of the Invisible World defended the trial, showing how deeply people believed in witchcraft. However, Robert Caleb's More Wonders of the Invisible World criticized the proceedings, showing that not everyone agreed with the court's actions. These separate viewpoints demonstrate that Salem was already experiencing debate and reaction during the crisis itself. Although the trials had begun as a reaction to fear, the consequences led to a shift in thinking. As executions continued, more people began to question the fairness of the trials. Ministers and community leaders started to doubt the use of spectral evidence and reliability of accusations.
John Hale, a minister who once supported the trial, later expressed regret and a modest inquiry into the nature of witchcraft. Judge Samuel Sewall publicly apologized for his role, as recorded in his diary. These moments show a turning point where individuals began to recognize the injustice that had not only taken place, but they had been aware of. This shift in opinion represents a kind of revolution. People began to question authority, evidence, and the role of fear in decision making. The trials forced society to reconsider how justice should work.
The aftermath of the trials led to important reforms. Courts became more cautious about accepting unreliable evidence, especially testimonies based on visions or superstitions. The trials helped strengthen ideas about due process and need for clear evidence before punishment. Later historians such as Charles Upham and Salem's Witchcraft viewed the trials as a warning about panic and legal failure. Over time, Salem became an example used to teach future generations about the danger of mass hysteria and injustice. The memory of the trials influenced how Americans thought about fairness, responsibility, and the power of the legal system.
The trials did not immediately change laws overnight, but they contributed to the long-term reforms in how evidence and accusations were treated. They became a reminder that fear should never replace justice.
The Salem witch trials represent a powerful example of revolution, reaction, and reform. Fear and social tension created a reaction that led to injustice and tragedy. However, the recognition of those mistakes led to changes in thought and legal practice that influenced American history.
By studying Salem, we saw how easily fear can overcome reason, but also how society can learn from these failures. The trials remind us that injustice can lead to change and that understanding the past helps prevent similar mistakes in the future.
The story of Salem is not only about witchcraft, it is about human behavior under pressure, the consequences of fear, and the importance of reform after tragedy. Without understanding this reaction to fear and false accusations, we cannot fully understand the reforms that followed or appreciate the lessons Salem continues to teach today.